and very successful, has his own fan club, and pays a lot of the bills around the farm actually with his work. He's also got four hooves and a tail. He's a show jumping stallion named Capone One. I always joke about that and say it's actually cool because I can always say that my boyfriend really is hung like a horse. People usually blush, like you can't say that. I did, I said it. Not really sorry about it. So I have kind of a different life that I live in a barn, actually, and with the guys and have for a long time.
Unfortunately for Doug, any disagreements he might have had with the case didn't really matter, and he was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in prison with another 2 years of probation. This sentencing was strictly for his federal probation violations, and he still faced charges of animal cruelty that were pending in Whatcom County. The news of Doug Spink's arrest and his bestiality farm quickly made headlines in Whatcom County. Working as a volunteer animal rescue writer for the Whatcom Humane Society, Corrine Maloney was made aware of the animal saved from Doug Spink's cabin. And it was around this time that she began to investigate the situation, conducting interviews with Doug over the span of the next 8 years. This investigation resulted in the aforementioned book, Uniquely Dangerous. The most charitable way to describe Corrine Maloney is incompetent. A more harsh interpretation is that she is a dangerously apologetic enabler. Nothing in this book demonstrates this better than its opening statement. This book is dedicated to the animals who are killed by humans when their secret lives with zoos are discovered. Corrine Maloney doesn't seem to be concerned with the animals who are taken advantage of by zoophiles. Rather, she is concerned with animals that are supposedly euthanized after their abuse is discovered. This sentiment is a common lie spread by zoophiles to deter their detractors from speaking out. They claim that if you report someone sexually engaging with an animal, you are essentially killing that animal. In reality, animals will only be euthanized if there is irreconcilable mental or physical damage. This idea, ironically, is disproven by the case regarding the 2010 sting in Whatcom County. The mice discovered were euthanized under the belief that their lives would not be very good if they continued living, given the fact that their tails were cut off, strings were tied to their body, and they were, the stuff that they went through, the sort of canal they probably saw, I think, did enough damage that the rescuers determined it was probably over for them. Meanwhile, the 7 dogs and 4 stallions who were recovered at the scene were not euthanized. Rather, they were sent to various shelters or rehomed. On top of talking to Doug, Corrine uncritically interviewed and shared the stories of other zoophiles, where they were free to bellyache and exhaust their proclivities. In Chapter 14, coming out, Corrine interviewed a 68-year-old man named Bernard. She dedicated 2 pages in the book where the man was free to air his grievances with not being accepted in society. Bernard had started abusing a 2-year-old dog named Ashley at the age of 16. After Ashley passed, he began abusing her offspring, following their offspring as well, and the terrible, disgusting cycle continued. Corrine frames Bernard as a man who suffers physical side effects from the stress of hiding a secret, yet remains proud of who he is, as if he is a downtrodden outcast, unfairly mistreated by society. Chapter 16, Lady Buble, tells the story of a zoophile named Philip Buble. Philip was much more open about his interests than most zoos, sharing it with his family and friends. His father, in particular, was disgusted by this, and when he walked in on his son French kissing the family dog, he snapped. Later that night, Philip's father attacked him with a crowbar, beating him within an inch of his life. This resulted in a broken arm, 63 stitches, and permanent neurological damage. But Bernard is a forgiving man, who was upset by his father's prison sentence for attempted murder. Yet, he remained frightened, paranoid that the world was out to get him, up until his untimely death in 2010. In the 48th chapter, titled Donkey Love, Corrine seemingly attempts to normalize the concept of human-animal relations, referencing a handful of villages on the northern coast of Colombia, which encourage young men to have sex with donkeys. None of these stories have anything to do with Doug. They do nothing aside from attempt to humanize zoophiles. Scrutiny is exempt from all of these stories, and if anything, they do nothing but attempt to excuse the deplorable acts of mentally ill degenerates. As to why Corrine felt so compelled to charitably shine a light on the life of zoophiles, it's not really certain. What is certain is that she dedicated 8 years to writing a book that Doug openly promotes as a reputable source of information. During these 8 years, Corrine would frequently meet up with Doug, beginning their string of interactions while he was still in prison. While Doug viewed his first sentencing as a blessing in disguise, he had a much more unfavorable view of his second stint in prison, believing he was being persecuted based on his sexuality, and even described himself as a political prisoner. Doug spent most of his time in jail, the same way he did during his previous incarceration, reading hundreds of books and taking a job as an educational tutor for the inmates. During his second stint, he shared a cell with Mike Fenter, who was serving 10 years for a handful of armed robberies in California and Washington State. Fenter was notably disgruntled by government bailouts given to banks during the Great Recession of 2008, saying, What I am for is real justice, real truth, and real accountability within our system of government. The money was used and is probably currently being used to get to the truth. Venter also owned a farm called Compass Rose in Port Townsend, Washington, which his wife, Kat
I hope
Teen,
you
was
don't plan
forced
on
to run
staying
by
in because we have
herself after
company
his
coming, so I
arrest.
hope you
When
do not
Doug was
plan on
released
staying
from
in the bed.
prison in
I
April
know.
of
Ew.
2013, he
What is
came
that
to
smell?
Katine hat in
I don't
hand,
know. You already
asking
just
for work
sprayed.
and a place to stay.
No, you farted.
Katine, disconnected
No,
from
not.
the internet and likely unaware of Doug's past crimes, allowed him to take residence in a small trailer on the property. The probation department, which was responsible for approving Doug's housing and ensuring he was not near animals, mistakenly approved his stay in the trailer. That was until they found out he was living amongst a herd of sheep, where they then demanded he find new housing. Doug was offended by the implication, indignantly stating, "I am not a sheep fucker." Doug rented a brand new home just 11 miles away, but still opted to spend most of his time on the farm. Katine ran into issues with coyotes poaching her sheep, which Doug saw as a perfect opportunity to acquire a new victim. He convinced Katine to purchase a Caucasian shepherd named Baca, a rare breed known for its herding and guarding capabilities. Next door to Compass Rose was a dog breeding operation run by Andrew Johnston. Doug had known Johnston previously, as they had bred a litter of puppies together in 2007. He was promised one of the dogs under the pretense that he found owners for all of the remaining litter. Doug was unsuccessful in finding new owners and was not given one of the puppies, which he was furious over. This ultimately soiled their relationship and future business prospects. Doug took a liking to a 5-year-old dog named Genghis, a canine he believed was being abused by Johnston. This is entirely possible, as in 2009, Johnston was warned by police after receiving an animal cruelty complaint. Katine's mother, Beverly, also allegedly witnessed Johnston abusing one of his dogs. With this, Doug decided to steal Genghis from Johnston, cutting a hole in the fence that separated their properties and taking him in the middle of the night. When Johnston discovered this, he quickly called the police and placed blame in the hands of Spank. Law enforcement found Doug at his home, where they found Baca in his truck. Genghis, on the other hand, was nowhere to be found. To this day, it is unknown where Genghis went, as he was never seen again. In 2024, he would be over 20 years old, so it's certain that he's since passed away. This would not be the end of Doug's legal troubles, however, as he still faced charges of animal cruelty from his sting operation in Whatcom County. That being said, Doug believed it was a case he was sure to beat. I would like to say that on the Whatcom County case, that case was filed right before the statute of limitations expired. As a result of the 2010 incident, my lawyer and I are fighting that vehemently. We're fighting the constitutionality of the state underlying that case, and in the strongest possible terms. And we're looking to overturn that statute on the basis of a flagrant violation of the findings of the Supreme Court in Lawrence v. Texas, as well as numerous due process violations of the statute itself. That's the status of the Whatcom County case. I'm proud to be fighting that case. I look forward to winning that case and to removing that statute from the books. For those unaware, Lawrence v. Texas was a case handled by the Supreme Court that ruled that the criminalization of sodomy between consenting adults was unconstitutional. Doug believed his sexuality was no different than being gay, and sought to use this landmark decision as his greatest weapon in advocating for his innocence. Obviously, this didn't work. Doug had his probation revoked and was forced to serve the remaining 9 months behind bars. Once his sentence was complete, he still faced animal cruelty charges in Whatcom County, stemming from the sting operation on his cabin in Sumas. Doug originally accepted a plea deal admitting to 1 count of animal cruelty and agreeing to a lifetime ban on owning dogs in the state of Washington. However, the judge opted to throw out the plea deal and sentenced him to 90 days in prison, as well as banning him from owning dogs for life. Doug requested a few weeks to get his affairs in order before officially being sent to prison, which he was granted. During this time, he fled to Canada with his boyfriend. At that, I had a decision to make. Go back to that state, face further open-ended persecution without a real lawyer, and having already seen a stacked deck sentencing hearing take place that I knew was headed off the rails. I decided that, based on all I've seen and know, going back voluntarily represented a genuine risk to my safety, and I had no idea when or if I could return to Canada once that thing down there was finished. Would they frame me for something else? Add some new change out of nowhere? Try to involuntarily commit me under some specious psych diagnosis? I put none of that past them. I decided that I would simply step back from the jail sentence and let things play out. Doug made a new home for himself in Port Stanley, Ontario, where he spent the next 8 months in hiding. But, like a moth to a flame, it was only a matter of time before he found himself in the hands of law enforcement again. On August 9, 2015, police were informed of a disheveled man with a towel around his waist wandering into local businesses along Warncliffe Road in Lambeth. He initially gave them a fake name, but was eventually identified and arrested. Doug blamed this incident on his supposed PTSD, saying, "Yesterday I found myself in contact with local police officers without any of my ID or driver's license on hand. I was not in my best form, having that morning engaged some personal demons in an hours-long event. Let's just call it an event for now, in the local swamps and forest land. I was recovering from a deep dive into the cold waters of genuine terror, and I'm not in my home country, driving a vehicle with expired plates," and so on. All irresponsible and, in a word, dumb. Doug was released from prison the next day after the detention center holding him made an error. Authorities quickly rearrested him the following day, and he was eventually deported and sent back to America. He spent a few months living with his mother, Claire, in Pennsylvania, before sneaking back into Canada. Of course, Doug's habitual run-ins with the law didn't magically stop here. In November of 2015, emergency workers received word of a fire taking place at the home of Ronald Matuszek, a man who had been letting Doug stay with him during his most recent stints in Canada. Eyewitnesses reported seeing Doug with Matuszek in a headlock, threatening to stab him if they came any closer. He eventually let go of the man before running away, breaking into another person's home and exiting shortly after. Police intercepted Doug and arrested him, but he didn't go down without a fight. Once in the police cruiser, he smashed both of the backseat windows, bent the radar antenna, and smashed his head on the plexiglass barrier at least 10 times. For this behavior, he served 150 days in jail and was sent back to America again. After being dropped off in New York, he returned to his childhood home to live with his mother. Doug, whose mental state had regressed severely, asked to sleep in his mother's room. She refused, but allowed him to sleep on a pile of blankets outside of her door. On the night of April 4th, 2016, Doug was awoken by a metal plant holder falling on a glass sliding door. Thinking someone was breaking in, he rushed into his mother's room, grabbed her .38 caliber revolver, and put it to his own head. After calming him down, Claire took her son to the basement to talk. Doug then rushed back up the steps and fired 3 rounds. Believing her son was dead, Claire went to investigate, finding he was still alive with multiple bullet holes lodged in the walls and ceiling. Claire quickly left to call the police at her neighbor's home, and during this, Doug began walking down the street in a panicked state. A random driver noticed Doug on the side of the road and offered their help. He requested they bring him to the police station, which they initially obliged. However, as Doug became more erratic, they asked him to get out. He eventually found himself at a gas station, where one of the employees promptly called the police. When they arrived at the scene, Doug was curled up in the fetal position behind the store's counter. It took 5 officers and 3 sets of handcuffs to eventually subdue him, and he was then rushed to the hospital. There, he stayed for a week before being moved to Butler County Prison, where he faced a total of 17 criminal charges, 12 of which were felonies. Those charges included 1 count of possession of a prohibited firearm, 3 counts of discharging a firearm into an occupied structure, 5 counts of aggravated assault, 4 counts of recklessly endangering another person, 1 count of criminal mischief for breaking a screen door, and another 3 counts of criminal mischief for the $5,000 in damage caused to the gas station during the struggle. Unable to pay his bail of $35 grand, Doug remained in custody while awaiting prosecution. Unfortunately, Doug walked away with nothing more than a slap on the wrist, charged with misdemeanor criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and resisting arrest. By February of 2017, Douglas Spink was a free man once again. It is truly remarkable that despite his habitual disregard for the law, he always manages to find himself out of prison. Doug was now more than ever a danger to both animals and humans. He was a ticking time bomb who brought chaos and terror wherever he went. With his behavior almost being reinforced by the legal system's negligence, it was only a matter of time before he once again had run-ins with law enforcement. Paranoid by his previous encounters with police, Doug no longer felt safe living in his apartment, opting to sleep in his car in various locations in Butler County. In November of 2017, he accidentally got his car stuck in an alley, where he decided to just take a nap. A police officer found him and attempted to take him to a hospital, as he had a mental health warrant and hadn't been meeting with a psychiatrist. Doug also had his service dog Cav with him. How he was able to gain access to another animal is beyond me, but we can basically chalk it up to pure negligence on the part of everybody involved. Doug refused to go to the police, eventually pulling a knife on his dog Cav, threatening to kill the dog if they arrested him. A 2-hour-long standoff ensued with officers attempting to coax him out of his car. Eventually, Doug did give up and exited the vehicle, yet still refused the officers' request to get down on both knees. In a fit of rage, he charged the officers, resulting in him being tased and shot with beanbag ammunition. Doug's heart stopped beating at the scene. However, paramedics successfully revived him in the ambulance. He woke up in the hospital 3 days later and was subsequently transferred to the medical unit in Butler County Prison. He was then charged with aggravated assault, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. Once again, like in so many chapters of Doug's life, he found himself in a prison cell. Doug spent the next 11 months incarcerated, being released sometime in October of 2018. It was around this time that he began treatment for his recently diagnosed stage 4 cancer. This diagnosis was terminal, and his death was imminent. He knew his time was running out. Instead of achieving liberation for zoophiles and their furry companions like he dreamt of, he wasted a majority of his life running from federal authorities or rotting in prison. Now he was confined to a bed, staying in his childhood home with his strongest enabler, his mother. During this time of waning mortality, he felt compelled to make one final push. Over the years, Doug attempted to organize a handful of social justice campaigns, obviously with the goal of normalizing and destigmatizing zoophilia. The Deep Justice Network was created by Doug sometime in late 2013, which sought to build a legal defense fund for zoos. Taking inspiration from civil rights movements of the past, this network pathetically attempts to draw comparisons to anti-black racism, sexism against women, and homophobia. The Deep Symbiosis Institute, also founded in 2013, with an attempt to intellectualize the topic of zoophilia as if it's a human condition worth understanding. In this, Doug seeks to redefine the meaning of zoophobe. Traditionally defined as the irrational fear of animals, he describes it as the bigotry which manifests itself as a violent, irrational, often inexplicable hatred of cross-species intimate relationships, and of the general concept of non-human sexuality and sexual identity. Then there's Can't Be Porn, which is potentially the most depraved of his efforts on the surface. This was a Twitter account that featured videos of animals engaging in intercourse. The intent was seemingly for him to try to point out that if animals can't consent to sex, then animals having sex with each other isn't sex at all. A mind-numbingly stupid argument that fails on all fronts. But the most notable of all these efforts is the Cross-Species Alliance. This organization is the epitome of Doug's beliefs and rhetoric. Like previous movements, the Cross-Species Alliance morally postures that those who despise zoophiles are equivalent to racists, sexists, and homophobes. Its biography also includes the hashtag LGBTZ, created in a pathetic attempt to retcon these freaks into the LGBT community. However, Doug's final push for justice was his most infamous yet. On March 7, 2019, a Twitter account named The Exposure Solution would tweet the following: "We have a problem. Animals are being taken advantage of every single day, and people are too ambivalent to do anything about it. Exposing zoophiles is the solution to the problem. We need to put them out where everyone can see them and expose them for what they really are. Zoophiles like to call people zoophobes when they call out their behavior. If you wear that title with pride, then join our hate party movement. We'll show zoos exactly how we feel about their sexuality." On March 20th, 2019, we will be launching a new podcast, the first of its kind, dedicated to exposing the zoo community for what it is. We want outrage. Help spread the word. We're going to start a movement and change the conversation forever. Join the hate party. How do you join the hate party? Easy. Use the hashtag HateParty tag on Twitter. Follow us and check out our site expose.id. Tell everyone exactly what you think about zoophiles. And of course, tune into the first episode of our podcast, The Exposure Solution, on March 20th. What can you expect from our podcast? Right off the bat, we'll be exposing a secret zoophile, someone who's pretty famous in fact. We'll have another one for you every single episode. So we hope you're ready to show your teeth, hashtag HateParty. We want all ears tuned in on March 20th. Inevitably, that day would come, and the exposure solution would go public.
The first zoophile to be exposed is a household name in the fantasy community. He's even appeared in movies, on television, and has had roles in video games. This zoophile is... the Lord of Horses himself, Shadowfax!
You see, the exposure solution was actually the name of the first episode of the Zoo the Now podcast. The celebrity in question they sought to expose was Shadowfax, the non-fictional horse of Gandalf the Grey. All of this was done simply to draw the attention of zoophiles and their detractors. This supposed group of internet vigilantes, hell-bent on seeking justice for countless numbers of animals, was nothing more than a ruse. In reality, Douglas Spink was behind all of it. Under his infamous online moniker, Fausty, he used this fake Twitter account as a promotion for his newest project. With the help of his co-host, Toggle the Rat, the two intended to fight for the rights of zoophiles.
When we started this podcast, I had been several months previously diagnosed with terminal stage 4 metastatic malignant melanoma that had spread to my lungs, and this was really intended to a degree as my swan song and my last opportunity to give something back before I wrapped up shop and headed on to greener pastures.
Just about everyone familiar with Zooier Than Thou was well aware of Douglas Spink, earning himself a Kiwi Farms thread posted in November of 2018. Toggle the Rat, on the other hand, had intentionally his identity. Typically when posting selfies, Toggle used his iPhone's Memoji function to replace his head with a cartoon mouse. While this was successful in covering his face, it still left a trail of breadcrumbs that could potentially reveal his identity. In 2018, Toggle attended Midwest Fur Fest, posting multiple pictures of himself with friends at the convention. One photo in particular showed him out of his fursuit and in street clothes, wearing a gray zip-up hoodie, a black t-shirt, and a pair of glasses. People began searching for clues, eventually stumbling upon a photo posted by a user named Fink, featuring a man who fit the description, wearing a similar outfit and pair of glasses. Kiwi farmers also managed to find a Twitter account for a Memphis-based animal rock band called Exit Mouse. They eventually stumbled across a video of their vocalist doing warm-ups, who looked identical to the man in the first photo. Both of these images also share a resemblance, with the avatar's Toggle publicly posted to his Twitter account, featuring short brown hair, patchy facial hair, and glasses. On top of this, both the Exit Mouse and Toggle the Rat Twitter accounts used the character creating software Hero Forge around the same time. Toggle also posted a picture of a new mask he had bought, which the lead singer of Exit Mouse also happened to own. While both of these could be pure coincidence, it certainly adds credence to the theory. As people dug deeper, they discovered a post made on Bandcamp in 2017, revealing the original name of the band was Husky in Denial, before changing it to Exit Mouse. During this era of the band, the vocalist's online moniker was Smooch This Pooch, demonstrated through archives of the band's Twitter. With this Twitter, Kiwi farmers managed to find more pictures of the vocalist, along with pictures of his husband, Trevor. Most notably, however, the Husky in Denial Tumblr account was found, where the man carelessly docks himself while showing off his new guitar strings, revealing his name as Buck Riley. This coincides with both his Twitter and for affinity accounts identifying himself as Buck. While the new address in the photo was out of date, Buck's husband, Trevor, accidentally leaked their new address when venting his frustrations at Grubhub not delivering his Taco Bell on time. Kiwi Farms users were able to locate his new home on Google Maps and confirmed his residency with a Facebook post showing the front yard and unique metal lattice trim. This post in particular was also a crucial piece of evidence that Toggle the Rat was in fact Buck. Posted on February 18th of 2020, Trevor states that a stray dog was abandoned near their home and asked his followers if anyone would be willing to take him in. Coincidentally, 3 days later, Toggle the Rat posted about an abandoned dog that he and his husband had been taken care of. Another alternate alias, Clunk, was also discovered, as people found two posts that were nearly identical being posted by Husky in Denial and Chipmunk Clunk. This led investigators to find a list of fetishes posted by Clunk. These included age play, animals, grandfather/grandson, and underage characters. This also coincides with Buck's frequent and bizarre defense of cubs, which are underage furry characters. Eventually, through more digging, Kiwi farmers were able to find out that Buck was only a nickname, with his real name being Charles Alexander Berry. Hypothetically, there is a chance that all of these parallels are simply a long string of unfortunate coincidences. However, this is very unlikely to be the case. It seems that Toggle became aware of Doug through his Cross Species Alliance Twitter account. Their first encounter actually sparked a disagreement regarding the infamous Zoo Sadism leaks of September 2018, during which Toggle, at one point, referred to the account's admin as petulant. However, this insult would not sour the future relationship between the two. Shortly after, Toggle happened to begin reading Uniquely Dangerous when he noticed that the Cross Species Alliance was referenced in the book. He quickly put two and two together and realized that Doug Spink was behind the account.
And I know